Hi, good evening everybody. So I just wanted to go through question number 2 in your homework. I had given you, made sure that you had the proper numbers when it came to the vertex, the zeros, and the y-intercept. I'm going to go ahead and talk through how I got those numbers. So for our vertex, I always suggest you do the vertex first. Remember to find the x value of the vertex, it's negative b over 2a. So when I look at my equation, b is 64, so that'd be negative 64 over 2 times a, which is negative 16. I get negative 64 over negative 32, which equals a positive 2 for my x value, for my vertex. And when I look at my graph, here's where x is 2. Here's my vertex. So my vertex is at 2 something. I already told you it's 144, but where that came from is you can plug into your equation. I want to know the height when my x value is 2. Negative 16 instead of t, we know it's 2, plus 64 times 2, plus 80. Okay, then you're going to take your calculator and you're going to just plug this in just like you see it. We have negative 16 parenthesis 2 squared plus 64 parenthesis 2 plus 80. Once everything's in, press enter. I got 144. So the height when x is 2, the y value is 144. So I'm going to label this guy up here. And we've already gotten this because I gave you that during class. The y-intercept, I said was 0, 80. You can look at your equation. This is your y-intercept. The last value is always your y-intercept. You can look at the graph and you can count it 50, 60, 70, 80. All right. Or you can plug in 0 for the variable. It's always where x is 0, so these would cancel out, leaving just the 80. Okay, so that's our y-intercept. For our zeros, that's your quadratic formula. So that takes a little bit more time. I'm going to end up with 2 answers. One's going to be negative, one's going to be positive. So I have my quadratic formula. It's negative b, so b is 64, so negative 64 plus or minus, meaning we're going to work this through 2 times, the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. Once I've got this set up, I'm going to simplify it down to make it a little bit easier to work with. This is only going to tell my x values. It's negative 64 plus or minus the square root. When I work all of this out, I put b squared minus 4ac into my calculator. I get 9,216 divided by negative 32. So we're going to simplify these down using our calculator. And if I want to do this all at once, I need to have the parentheses so I can do this all at once. It's saying calculate the top number, then divide it by negative 32. So I'm going to say parentheses, negative 64, I'm going to do the minus number first, the square root of 9216. You've got to come out from under the square root to close your parenthesis. So now there's the top, and that whole thing is divided by negative 32. Without the parentheses, the order of operations will divide the radical by the negative 32 and then do the math with the negative 64. So we don't want to do it that way. When I hit enter, I get 5. So that's my x value, and automatically at the x-axis, the y value is 0. So there's one of the x-intercepts. To find the other, I've already got everything put in, so I'm just going to go back up and I'm going to highlight this and press enter, and it's going to copy it. I'm going to backspace to the negative sign and change it to a positive sign, and that is the x value of negative 1, and the y value there will be 0. So that's where these 2 zeros came from, and one of them is not in the real world, so I crossed him off because this is the guy I'm really interested in. So we have 5, 0 here. We know our y-intercept is 0, 80. Okay, so now I'm going to go look at some questions. Find the maximum height of the apple. Well, the maximum height occurs at the vertex. Height is a y value, so this is going to be 144 feet. Okay. How many seconds will it take for the apple to reach the ground? So they're going to throw the apple, and we want to know how long it takes for it to get here. Remember, your time is across your x-axis. It hits the ground at 5, and what that means is 5 seconds. What height was the apple launched from? So what's the starting height of the apple? It started way up here at 80 feet. Because our height was in feet. And then the final question was, how long did it take the apple to reach its maximum height? So they want to know, how long was it from here to here? Well, the time is an x value. So the x value of the vertex is 2. So that means it took 2 seconds for it to reach its maximum height from launch. Okay. The only question we haven't answered yet is our domain and range. So remember, our domain is going to start at the origin, and it's going to go until the object hit the ground. So our domain is from 0 to 5. And then our range, we always read from the bottom up. Well, the bottom in the real world is the ground. So we're going to, and the highest it's going to go is that vertex. It can't go past there because that's the trajectory it took. Height is a y value. The y there is 144, so your range is going to be from the ground to 144 feet is the range. All right, so hopefully this is helpful. I want to give you an example that you might run into in a couple of later questions. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to show you how to read your calculator some. Take your equation, -16, go ahead and use x squared plus 64x plus 80. And let's go look at the table of values. We got to be in the positive areas, so I'm just going to kind of move it down just a little bit, so we're only looking at positive numbers. Now, questions I could ask you. All right, so I switched out for my phone calculator, so it gets a little bit easier to see in the light. Questions I can ask you that involve reading this table is I could say, how high was the apple after 4 seconds? Well, seconds is an x value, so I'd go where x is 4. The apple would have been 80 feet. I could have asked you how much time passed when the apple was 128 feet off the ground. So feet off the ground would be a height. That's a y value, but I noticed there's 2 y values that are the same. That's because the apple went up and then came back down and hit the same y value. So if I said how long has passed for it to be at 128 feet, it's 1 second and it's 3 seconds. Both of those answers are correct. How much time has passed when the apple is 80 feet in the air? Well, 80 feet in the air, here's my one. It's at 4 seconds. So these are the kinds of questions that will be asked later too. That you just got to determine, are they giving me an x value or a y value? So hopefully that was helpful. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.